Jesus asking you this morning, who do you say that I am? It's as if Jesus is asking, what are we prepared to learn by this? Well, that all depends on who people say that I am. Mark's entire gospel is devoted to answering this question. So much so that by the end of Mark, it becomes clear that Jesus is universally recognized. Jesus is recognized by the Holy Spirit descending like a dove as Jesus emerges out of the baptism waters. At the same time, Jesus is recognized by God, identified by the voice coming from heaven. Jesus also is recognized by unclean spirits. Humans also are capable of recognizing Jesus. All recognize Jesus, that voice from heaven, you are my Son, the beloved, I am well pleased. You are the Christ, the anointed one. You are the Son of God. You are the Son of Man. And Peter's answer that we hear today, you are the Messiah. By the end of chapter 9 of this shortest of Gospels, chapter 9 is where our Gospel comes from today, Mark has just 16 chapters. You can read from the beginning to the end of Mark in about 2 hours. In fact, I suggest that you take some time out of your week to do just that. Carve out 2 quiet hours of a day with a Bible and a pot of tea. By the end of your second cup of tea, you will come to remember how Jesus reveals himself as the Son of Man, the Son of the Father, and the Son of God, alongside the universal recognition that I just named by God, by the Holy Spirit, by the unclean spirits, and everyday humans like you and me. This, I think, is what makes the Gospel of Mark so convincing. Jesus is recognized universally. The God of the universe and of heavenly beings, along with humanity, and even the evil forces at work in the world, can all accurately identify Jesus. The law and the prophets are fulfilled by the most unlikely Messiah in the most unexpected, unimaginable, and radical means. What are we prepared to learn from this? This is a question shared by Archbishop Rowan Williams. After September 11th, what are we prepared to learn? Williams asks in his book, Writing in the Dust. Archbishop Williams was present at a meeting that morning in Lower Manhattan, Broadway at Wall Street, Trinity Episcopal Church. Trinity is just a few hundred yards from where the Twin Towers fell. Life's circumstances and world events have a way of showing the world how well or how poorly we live our commitments to God and one another. God always has to be rediscovered, Williams writes. This means that God always has to be heard or seen where there aren't yet words for him. God always has to be rediscovered. This is also what crosses are for. Life's crosses are for us to rediscover God. Our rediscovery happens before we can find the words to put to the base of human experience. This is what Jesus is saying to us in this morning's gospel. Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? Tertullian is an early writer in the church. He was born in the 2nd century, around the year 150. So you can imagine that somebody that is a Christian writer, born in the mid-100s, would have some connections to eyewitness accounts, or those who knew people that had eyewitness accounts. That's how stories happen. And he has this to say about our cross. Your cross, Tertullian says, means your own anxieties and sufferings in your own body. Our cross reminds us that our anxieties and sufferings are not just ours. They are part of a larger order. Our crosses remind us that we are not exempt from suffering, but God takes on our anxieties and our sufferings and has the ability to transform them. Williams reflects, God has made the world so that evil choices cannot just be frustrated or aborted, but they have to be confronted. They have to be suffered. They have to be taken forward. They have to be healed in the complex process of human history. This happens always in collaboration with what we do and say and pray together. God, however, will not be contained by our trying to shape God to serve our own needs in a crisis or anything else that we conjure up in our imaginations. And isn't this what Peter wanted to do? Though Peter knows rightly that Jesus is the Messiah, Peter wants to control the outcome. Peter wants to stop what Jesus reveals will happen from happening. Jesus isn't quite the Messiah that was expected. What kind of Messiah suffers and dies? Even though Peter loves Jesus, Peter's knowledge is limited. So is ours. For the sake of creation, where suffering is part of life, God promises the transformation of all of our crosses. This is what God shows through Jesus. God does not bring suffering, God transforms it. This is how we can trust that God is always bigger than the crisis. God is always bigger than our individual need and will act according to God's bigness. Everything has one sobering consequence. Suffering in one region is connected with action in another. In other words, all things are interconnected, and this is what ecology is about, the study of the interrelatedness of all things. Ecology, like home and economy from last Sunday, all of these words are rooted in the word oikos. Recall that oikos is the theme for this year's season of creation. All things that are interrelated find their being and sense of home in everything else. Suffering is what interrupts the balance. Suffering interrupts the balance of our relationships with others, with God, and with ourselves, with all of creation. Rowan Williams suggests that we who call ourselves Christians have every reason to say no. Say no to any system at all that uses suffering to prove something. Because God does not create suffering. Though God will find an opportunity in suffering, in our suffering, God finds the opportunity for a communication from God to occur. An opportunity for the opening up of something else that is not part of the system that is run by humanity. Think about how the cross communicates. The cross of Jesus is one of our central images. for suffering. The shape of our bodies, with our arms outstretched to one another, imitates it. For Jesus to be who Mark's gospel reveals him to be, the cross continues to be God's communication to us. It is not for us to own. It was never meant to be a mark of our suffering individually. It is meant to be the mark on this vulnerable world that we live in. Because the cross doesn't belong to one cause, it belongs to every cause. It is a symbol of transformation that moves us from suffering to always be moving to transformation born by God's love.